In this world, everyone awakens their talent at the age of 18, and the strong control everything. As a genius at #1 Sword Seoul High School in Xianhua Province, everyone expected me, Qin Qian, to awaken the strongest sword soul and become the future guardian of Dacia. However, fate played a cruel joke on me. At the awakening ceremony, I stood in front of the sword embryo with great expectations. But in the end, I only awakened a dull black iron sword and E-level talent. The expectations of the entire audience instantly turned into laughter, and the respect I once held became ruthless ridicule. The principal even announced on the spot that I would be expelled from school. The once highly regarded genius became a laughingstock overnight. Just as I fell into the abyss of despair, a mysterious power awakened within me, the devouring system. This system allows me to devour everything, rapidly improve my strength, and rise step by step from the weakest E-level to SSS level, and even reach higher, unknown realms. When the sea tide surged, ferocious beasts invaded, and Dacia's 32,600 kilometers coastline was shrouded in shadow. People began to pray to the gods to come and save them, but there was no response. At that moment, I stood in the sky, swallowing everything in endless darkness. I became the last hope of this world. 100 years ago, during the beast tide chaos, 6 of Dacia's 79 ranked sword emperors died. Recently, small-scale riots involving ferocious beasts have erupted in restricted areas, such as the Kunling Mountains, the Himalayas, and the Qinling Mountains. The west coast of the Pacific Ocean is no longer peaceful due to the leakage of nuclear wastewater. Even more shocking, a few days ago, the Sakura country was engulfed by a sudden rising tide. Rumor has it that this was an act of revenge by the ferocious beast siren. All of this suggests that a new round of beast tide may be approaching. At the same time, the beautiful country has awakened many S-level geniuses, possibly even an SS-level genius. In contrast, Dacia's strength has shown no significant improvement in years. This growing disparity has left people deeply uneasy, especially in the current international climate, with the beast tide crisis looming. The only remaining sword emperor, Dacia, is already old and frail, long unable to fulfill his duty. The times are calling for a new sword emperor to shoulder this heavy responsibility. As the college entrance examination approaches, will a new genius awaken and take up the task of protecting Dacia? Today, standing on the playground of the province's #1 Sword Seoul High School, I held the black iron sword in my hand, my heart heavy. My name is Qin Qian, and today is the day I awaken my sword soul. The sword in my hand is my newly awakened sword soul, grade E, black iron sword. This result shocked everyone, including myself. Given that I had always ranked first in soul strength tests, everyone believed I would awaken at least an S-level sword soul, or perhaps something even stronger. But the reality was that I had only awakened an E-level sword soul. As people realized I had awakened the most worthless sword spirit, laughter erupted. I saw the contempt in my classmates' eyes and heard the principal's rage as he announced I would be expelled. What made it worse was that my girlfriend Liao, without hesitation, threw herself into the arms of Zhou shouting, who had just awakened an S-level sword spirit. Lu Yao's betrayal taught me a harsh truth. In this world, strength is everything. However, everyone was deceived by appearances. I knew deep down that what I had awakened wasn't just some E-level black iron sword, but endless shadow, a sword spirit unrestricted by grade. It possesses infinite growth potential and can devour all energy for its own use. The moment I touched the awakening sword embryo, I could clearly feel the endless shadow greedily absorbing the embryo's energy. As the energy surged into my body, my soul pressure rapidly increased, from early second stage to late second stage, and the level of endless shadow evolved swiftly, unlocking many powerful abilities. I didn't stay at #1 Sword Seoul High School for long. Quietly, I left. I already had a clear goal in mind. In the next 3 months, I will do everything in my power to improve my abilities and win the provincial championship in the college entrance exam. As someone cast aside by society, I believe that when people learn the expelled student became the provincial top scorer, the principal, who thought he controlled everything, will become the laughingstock of the province. I will prove everything with my strength. After leaving school, I walked straight home, eager to see my mother. Since birth, I have never seen my father. My mother is my only family. She raised me alone, supported our household, and worked tirelessly despite her poor health. We lived in a simple rented house on the outskirts of town. She made a living by mending clothes, earning only a modest income. When I was a little older, I started taking on jobs to try my best to reduce my mother's burden. Later, I got together with Lu Yao and received great help from her father, Lu Xiang. Lu Xiang is the governor of Shanna province. He holds a high position of power and has strong financial resources. Lu Xiang found a convalescent villa for my mother and also paid for my tuition for 3 years of high school. Therefore, I have always been grateful to Lu Xiang. Over the years, a large part of my motivation to become stronger has come from the hope that I could use my own strength to give my mother a good life. Even if I had only awakened an E-level sword spirit, my mother would love me unconditionally and might even hold me in her arms and comfort me by saying that I had done well. My mother is the only person in the world who loves me unconditionally. However, when I rushed to the single-family sanatorium villa where my mother was staying, the scene before me ignited an unprecedented anger in my heart. My mother, Cheney Yancey, was being roughly dragged by her hair onto the street by a group of people. They threw out all of her clothes and daily necessities, then punched and kicked her as she lay on the ground, coughing continuously. Standing to the side and watching coldly was my future father-in-law, Lu Xiang, the governor of Shanna province. My blood was boiling and my veins throbbed with rage. It would have been fine if these people had mocked me or broken up with me, but they actually dared to bully my mother. I was so furious that I drew the endless shadow sword hanging at my waist. A dark and deep shadow immediately appeared on the blade, terrifying as the abyss. Devour endless shadows. I roared, rushing forward with lightning-fast steps like a ghost. I swung my sword, knocking away several servants who were attacking my mother. Screaming in pain, they were thrown several meters away and fell to ground in disarray. Lu Xiang, what are you doing? I shouted, standing protectively in front of my mother with the tip of my sword pointed at Lu Xiang's throat. Shadows on the blade gathered and dispersed, as if ready to explode at any moment. I didn't hide my anger at all. Lu Xiang, however, wasn't afraid in the slightest. He looked at me coldly, having completely shed his previous kindness and warmth. Qin Xian, you came back so quickly? It seems you've been kicked out of the province's #1 Sword Soul High School, Lu Xiang said, his hands in his pockets and his face full of disdain. Just moments ago, Lu Xiang had received news from his daughter Lu Yao that I had awakened an E-level sword spirit, and was now considered a so-called failure. The one who had actually awakened an S-level talent was Xiao Shouting, someone Lu Xiang usually ignored. This made him furious. The only reason he had allowed his daughter to get close to me was because he believed I had talent, that I would awaken a powerful sword spirit and have a promising future. But now, he believed he had bet on the wrong person and was completely disappointed, even angry with me. My hand trembled slightly as I held the sword. When I was in my first year of high school, Lu Yao and I fell in love. Soon after, I met Lu Xiang and got engaged with support. He not only paid for my 3 years of high school tuition, but also provided my mother with a convalescent villa to improve her living conditions. I had always been grateful to him, even though I never had deep affection for Lu Yao. However, everything had changed. During my awakening ceremony, I awakened the E-level sword soul they saw as worthless. Lu Yao broke up with me without hesitation, and Lu Xiang even drove my mother out of the villa and onto the street without any concern. This made me see their true colors. They only approached me because they believed I had talent and expected me to awaken at least an S-level sword spirit. But once Lu Xiang thought I was worthless, he ruthlessly abandoned both me and my mother. But he was wrong. I am not a loser who awakened a useless sword soul. My sword soul is the endless shadow, possessing unlimited growth potential and capable of devouring everything. My future achievements are limitless. Unfortunately, Lu Xiang has completely lost me, his once talented son-in-law. Even if I had truly awakened a useless sword soul and you wanted to abandon me, fine, but to drive my mother into the streets so cruelly? That I cannot forgive. I glared at him, my sword still pointed at Lu Xiang. Lu Xiang remained fearless. He thought I was just a high school student who had only recently awakened his sword soul. Even though I had swept away a few of his servants, he believed it was only due to a fluke or brute strength. He didn't believe I could pose a real threat. A crowd had gathered along the roadside, whispering among themselves as they witnessed the scene. Isn't that Governor Lu Xiang? Who's the guy facing him? That's his future son-in-law, Qin Xian, right? But I heard Qin Xian awaken a useless sword spirit and has no future. My mother's weak voice interrupted my thoughts. Xian, cough, cough. She fell to the ground, her face pale and her body so weak that she could hardly get up. My heart ached, and I knew that the most important thing at this moment was to take my mother away from here and find a safe place for her to rest. I sheathed the endless shadow sword and carefully picked up my mother. Then I turned around, glared at Lu Xiang, and said, Lu Xiang, thank you for taking care of us, mother and son, for the past 3 years. But today, I've seen the true colors of you and your daughter. You threw my mother out onto the street, which means the kindness between us is now erased. I won't attack you today, but when we meet again in the future, I will never show mercy to you or the Lu family. I don't want a woman like Lu Yao, and you, Lu Xiang, are not worthy of being my father-in-law. I, Qin Xian, hereby break off the engagement with Lu Yao. Lu Xiang's face darkened instantly. I had actually dared to take the initiative to cancel the engagement. He had originally intended to have his daughter break off the engagement with me, thinking it was his decision to make. Now, I had taken the lead, as if his daughter was not even worthy of me. Lu Xiang watched me leave coldly, wondering to himself, could it be that this guy, who supposedly awakened only an 11th sword spirit, has some hidden variable we overlooked? Mom, are you okay? I asked gently as I laid my mother, Chenny Yancy, on the bed and pulled a quilt over her. After picking up my mother, I went straight back to the place we used to live. Fortunately, our old rental house had been vacant, so we rented it again. The landlady was a kind-hearted person. Seeing that my mother and I had returned, she readily rented the house to us and even gave us some daily necessities for free. The landlady said, I can see that you and your son are going through a hard time. You can stay here. I don't have much to offer, but I can still provide a place for you two to live. As for rent, pay whatever you can. If you have money, give some. If you don't, forget it. One of you is weak and sick, and the other is about to go to college. You'll need every penny. Save your money for yourselves. I was filled with gratitude and thanked the landlady profusely. If it hadn't been for her kindness, my mother and I would have had a hard time finding a place to stay in provincial capital. Although the house was simple, it carried many warm memories for my mother and me. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, the environment here was quiet, filled with flowers, plants, and trees, very beneficial to my mother's health. Xian, I'm fine. Don't worry, my mother said softly, leaning back on the bed and looking at me with gentle eyes. Just moments ago, on the street, I had stood in front of my mother and saved her from those cruel people. She must have remembered the little boy who always followed her around, and now that little boy had grown into a man who could protect her. Mom, Lu Xiang and his daughter approached us with ulterior motives. How dare he do this to you? I'll never let the Lu family go, I said, looking at my mother's haggard face, full of both sadness and fury. I could understand that the Lu father and daughter were only interested in profit. After they found out I had awakened a so-called useless sword spirit, they abandoned me without hesitation. But Lu Xiang shouldn't have thrown my mother into the street to be bullied. If I, Qin Xian, don't take revenge for this, I'm not a filial son. No. My mother shook her head and said softly, Lu Xiang is the governor of Shanna province and holds great power. You shouldn't go against him or you'll suffer. Mom is fine. She just has a few minor injuries. She paused and asked, but I heard from them that you awakened an E-level sword spirit, the black iron sword, right? At that time, my mother had been resting peacefully in the single-family villa that Lu Xiang had arranged for her. But then, without warning, Lu Xiang broke in with his servants and dragged her roughly out of bed. A sickly woman without a sword spirit, and a useless son with an E-level sword spirit. You two don't deserve to stay in my Lu family. Lu Xiang's words had deeply hurt my mother's heart. She was powerless to resist, but she was always worried about me, afraid that I would be devastated by awakening an E-level sword spirit. It's okay to have an E-level sword spirit, my mother said as she stretched out her arms to hug me and comforted me softly. If we can't become sword spirit masters, we can start a small business, earn enough to support ourselves, find you a good wife, and live a simple life. That would be quite happy, too. Mom! I felt her warm embrace and couldn't hold back my tears. The world is full of ups and downs. After the news spread that I had awakened a useless sword soul, my girlfriend left me, and my classmates spoke ill of me. Only my mother continued to love me unconditionally and regarded me as her dearest son. To her, my achievements didn't matter. What mattered was that I stayed safe and by her side. Mom, don't worry. Your son is not a failure who awakened an E-level sword spirit. I wiped away my tears and decided not to hide it from her anymore. Those people are blind. What I actually awakened is the endless shadow sword of an unknown level. This sword soul is not restricted by anything and has unlimited growth potential. It is even stronger than the legendary SSS level sword soul. Chen Yanzi showed a look of joy on her face and asked, "Really?" Chen Xian straightened up and answered proudly, "Of course it's true, Mom. How could I lie to you?" Okay. I knew my son was the best." Chen Yanzi looked at her son's proud expression, her heart filled with joy. She had always believed in her son. He had achieved excellent grades since childhood and had always been ranked first in school. How could he have only awakened an E-level sword spirit? Now, it was finally confirmed. Her son had actually awakened a power more powerful than an SSS-level sword spirit. Those people were truly blind. But what made Chen Yanzi most gratified was not the level of the sword spirit her son had awakened. It was that he had not been discouraged by it. Instead, he was full of fighting spirit and confidence. "I will take the college entrance examination in 3 months, be admitted to the best Sword Soul University, and become the most powerful Sword Soul Master," Chen Xian said firmly. "I believe you will succeed," Chen Yanzi said with a warm smile. After settling his mother down, Chen Xian went to the villa where she had lived previously, intending to take back some of her daily necessities and personal belongings. Chen Xian was determined not to take advantage of the Lu family. He took none of the items provided by them, only the old things that originally belonged to his mother. At the villa, Chen Xian did not meet Lu Xiang, but several servants were still present. Their eyes were full of malice and ridicule, but under Chen Xian's cold and unwavering gaze, they backed off one by one. After retrieving his mother's belongings, Chen Xian packed them up and stored them in a small warehouse. At the same time, he began to think seriously about how to make money. His mother, Chen Yanzi, was in poor health and required significant financial support to recover. He himself also needed money to train and purchase necessary consumables. Rent was also an expense. Although the landlady had told him not to worry about paying rent, Chen Xian decided he would pay the original price out of principle. After all, the landlady lived alone, and her life was not easy. Fortunately, Chen Xian had now awakened a sword soul even more powerful than the SSS level, the Endless Shadow Sword, and had officially become a sword soul master. This meant that Chen Xian was nearly invincible among his peers, and even capable of fighting experienced sword spirit masters. Therefore, earning money wouldn't be a difficult task for him. By chance, Chen Xian discovered an old leather box. Inside was a black cloak and an exquisite token. It was a token from the underground sword fighting arena. The underground sword fighting arena was not only a place to sharpen one's strength, but also a way to earn generous rewards. It was exactly where Chen Xian needed to go. With the cloak covering his face, Chen Xian realized these items might have once belonged to his father. Chen Xian knew very little about his father, not even his name. He only knew that his father had once been a professional sword fighter in an underground sword fighting arena, making money from intense competitions. However, shortly before Chen Xian was born, his father mysteriously disappeared. Although Chen Xian had asked his mother about his father in the past, she remained secretive. only revealing that his father's job had been very dangerous and that he was often injured. It was clear that his mother had not approved of his father's profession. Therefore, Chen Xian decided to conceal his identity and go to the underground sword fighting arena. He didn't want to cause his mother any worry. Before leaving, Chen Xian looked into the house through the window and saw his mother sleeping soundly in bed. He whispered to himself, "Love you, Mom. See you tomorrow." Then, he turned and walked into the night toward the underground sword fighting arena. The underground sword fighting arena was part of a gray industry. There were many large-scale sword fighting competitions every day. Fights where life and death didn't matter. The audience could not only watch these bloody battles, but also place bets and gamble for massive winnings. As a fighter in an underground sword fighting arena, one typically received a base salary according to their level, plus commission from bets. If their strength was high enough, the payout from a single match could be astronomical. Not long after Chen Xian found the underground sword fighting arena, he threw the brilliant token in his hand onto the front desk, signaling that he wanted to participate in the competition. The man at the front desk was immediately startled and flustered. Hey, I'll go find our manager. Please wait in the VIP room for a moment." Clearly, the token Chen Xian presented was of a very high level, well beyond the receptionist authority. Chen Xian grew more curious about the kind of person his father had been, though he still held resentment over his father's departure, especially because his mother had suffered so much. He couldn't help but want to learn more. Soon, the door to the VIP room opened, and a striking woman walked in. She wore a sleek black dress and had long, crimson hair. "Oh, I haven't seen you in so many years. What brings you here?" She stopped mid-sentence the moment she saw Chen Xian. Obviously, she had mistaken him for someone else, his father. Realizing that the person standing in front of her was not the man she once knew, her expression changed. The woman quickly regained her composure and sat down opposite Chen Xian with a smile. "Little brother, what do you want to do in our underground sword fighting arena?" She raised her eyebrows and teased. Chen Xian's heart tightened. He had disguised himself to hide his identity, but it seemed she had still seen through his age. "Of course, I came to the sword fighting arena to compete and make money," Chen Xian replied, deliberately lowering his voice to sound more mature. The woman covered her mouth and chuckled. "Ha! My name is Tao Hong. You can call me Sister Hong." Chen Xian didn't respond and simply looked at her quietly. Tao Hong didn't mind and continued with a smile. "Little brother, participating in a competition can be fatal. You just awaken your sword spirit, right? You should practice for a few more years before trying again." "I really need the money," Chen Xian said frankly. Tao Hong was silent for a moment, then took out a small crystal ball. "Okay, put your hand on this. I'll test your soul pressure. If you pass, I'll let you enter the competition." Chen Xian placed his hand on the crystal ball, without hesitation, and began to inject soul power into it. The strength of a sword soul master is directly related to soul pressure. Soul pressure is an indicator used to measure the level of a person's soul. The higher the soul pressure, the greater the power one can exert. The essence of a sword soul master's battle lies in the confrontation of soul pressure intensity. "Can you show me your sword soul?" Tao Hong asked with a flattering smile. Chen Xian shook his head. As a sword soul master, it was crucial to conceal the type and ability of one's sword soul. Otherwise, one could become a target for attack. Seeing this, Tao Hong stopped insisting. "Since you've already reached the late second stage, you're fully qualified to participate in our sword fighting competition. However, it's still too early for you to use that brilliant token. You should start with the black iron token." Chen Xian accepted the black iron token and nodded. Competitions in the underground sword fighting arena are divided into 6 levels: black iron, silver, gold, platinum, emerald, and brilliant. With Chen Xian's current strength, it was appropriate for him to start at the black iron level. "When can I compete?" Chen Xian asked. "Haha, little brother, you're so eager." "Don't worry. Sister will arrange it for you right away." Tao Hong teased. "Don't worry. I'm 18 years old," Chen Xian emphasized. Tao Hong covered her mouth and chuckled. "Okay, sister can tell, maybe another day," she teased deliberately. Not long after, Qin Xian had his first match. His opponent was a tall, muscular man over 1.9 meters tall. Inside the sword-fighting arena, the stands were packed, and the audience was buzzing with excitement and discussion. Who's that guy in black? Never seen him before. Is he a newbie? He's so unlucky, he drew Nepal for his first match. He's doomed. Nepal has won 10 matches in a row. One more, and he'll be promoted to a silver-level swordsman. This kid doesn't stand a chance. Qin Xian looked at his fierce opponent and relaxed instead, since the opponent was clearly ruthless. Qin Xian didn't hesitate to unleash Shadow Devourer. Not only would it take down his opponent, but it would also enhance his soul pressure and elevate his shadow level. Gaga gaga. Maba laughed so hard that his skin trembled. Boy, I advise you to admit defeat quickly or my sword will blind you. Laughter erupted from the stands all around, everyone looking down on Qin Xian. Quickly surrender, boy, or you'll die miserably. No one who fights against Nepal survives. Hurry up and kneel down to admit defeat, or you won't even get a chance to cry and beg for mercy later. Most of the audience was sarcastic toward Qin Xian, but his confidence came from Nepal's amazing record. He had killed all his opponents in 10 consecutive battles without sparing a single one. Although they shouted at Qin Xian to surrender, the audience actually wanted the two to start fighting immediately. They came to the gladiatorial arena to watch bloody fights, not to see who would give up early. For them, the bloodier and more brutal the match, the more interesting it was. Moreover, Nepal could be promoted to the silver level if he won one more fight, which many definitely would not show mercy. Qin Xian stood calmly in the ring, wearing a slightly worn black cloak with the hood covering his face. He had already signed a life-and-death agreement under Tao Hong's guidance, and no longer cared about life or death when stepping into the ring. In this sword-fighting arena, the rules for admitting defeat were extremely harsh. If you wanted to admit defeat, you had to get the consent of more than half the audience present. Even if you successfully admitted defeat, you faced many penalties, such as losing points and salary. More importantly, unless one party was killed, victory or defeat was entirely decided by the referee, who usually favored the audience's desires. The lives of sword fighters were not guaranteed. After learning all this, Qin Xian finally understood why his mother hated his father's job so much. A kind and gentle mother would naturally hate such a cruel environment, but Qin Xian had no choice. To earn enough money to take care of his mother and support his own training, he had to choose this dangerous path. Come on, Qin Xian said calmly. He was not afraid of Nepal. Even though his opponent's strength was at the peak of the second level, Qin Xian was confident he could handle it easily. I declare the match begins, the referee quickly announced before stepping down from the ring. Excited shouts erupted from the audience. Nepal will kill this ignorant boy. Another victory for him. Nepal drew his sword. The hilt was golden and the blade as white as ivory. He asked with a grim smile, "Why don't you draw your sword?" "No need," Qin Xian responded calmly. A gentle breeze blew, lifting his black cloak slightly. Even without drawing his sword, as long as he maintained strong control over his sword spirit, he could still exert extraordinary power. To hide his identity, Qin Xian had no intention of revealing his sword spirit. Arrogant. "I'll kill you." Nepal's eyes turned red with fury. He felt Qin Xian was blatantly despising him. Since awakening his sword spirit, no one had dared to show him such disrespect. "Charge! Mammoth sword!" Nepal roared. The golden sword energy around him condensed into the shape of a mammoth rushing toward Qin Xian. It appears as Nepal's mammoth charge. The mammoth sword is also a standout among B-level sword spirits. This kid is finished. The audience was buzzing with excitement. Many had seen Nepal use this move before, to tear his opponents into pieces. Seeing Qin Xian remain motionless, they were even more certain he would be shredded. However, Qin Xian stayed calm as he called out, "Swallow it, endless shadow." The endless shadow sword on his waist trembled. Shadows gathered from his body, gradually condensing into the shape of a sword. Shadow condensed. Qin Xian struck out with his sword, and the shadow sword collided with the mammoth sword, sparks flying everywhere. The tips of the two swords didn't actually collide, but the invisible auras on the swords confronted each other. The black shadows and golden airwaves intertwined and spread out in all directions. Nepal's eyes widened in disbelief. The audience was shocked too. Nepal's mammoth sword was known for its overwhelming power, and his mammoth charge had crushed countless enemies. But now, this young man in black blocked it with a casual sword strike. What was even more unbelievable was that Chun Xian didn't even seem to have drawn his real sword. The sword in his hand was just a fake sword condensed from his sword soul. Using less than 20% of his strength, this boy could still easily block Nepal's full attack. What terrible strength! Nepal was shocked. He really couldn't understand how Chun Xian did all this. No matter how hard he tried, the tip of his sword could never break through Chun Xian's defense. Chun Xian quietly looked at Nepal, gradually increasing the strength in his hands. Although his soul pressure level was slightly lower than Nepal's, the level of his sword soul was far higher than that of his opponent. He can definitely kill people beyond the level lock of darkness. Chun Xian suddenly grabbed with his left hand, and shadow vortexes appeared above and beneath Nepal's head. The spike chains instantly penetrated Nepal's sword protection, pierced his body, and passed straight through. Ah! Nepal let out a terrible scream, and the sword energy around him dissipated in an instant. Boy, what on earth did you use? Nepal spat out blood and was unable to move. The dark chains had penetrated his key acupuncture points and bone joints, making him unable to use his soul power or move.